Good evening, and welcome once again to Brush Up Your Shakespeare, where we make Shakespeare fun and easy, the way it was always meant to be. This is episode 18, and today we are now in Hamlet, Act 4, Scene 5. The line for tonight's episode is when sorrows come, they come not single spies, but in battalions. Isn't that a great line? It's like the way Shakespeare would say, it never rains, but it pours. When sorrows come, they come not single spies, but in battalions. Repeat it with me, please. When sorrows come, they come not single spies, but in battalions. And one more time, when sorrows come, they come not single spies, but in battalions. Hamlet is currently on his way to England, being escorted by Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, unknowingly to his death. On the way, Hamlet comes across a large force of Norwegian soldiers going to fight against Poland for a tiny piece of land worth nothing. This example of fighting to the death, where honor's at the stake, fills Hamlet with recriminations for not having revenged his father's death yet by killing the new king of Denmark, his uncle Claudius. But back at the castle, Hamlet's rash action in killing Polonius, hiding behind the arras in the queen's chambers, is exploding the lives of other people, specifically Ophelia, Polonius's daughter. Ophelia's position is tragic. First, she was ordered by her father Polonius to have nothing more to do with Hamlet. That was back in Act 1, with whom she was obviously deeply in love. Now, that same Hamlet has killed her father. As a result, she loses her mind. That is why Hamlet Act 4, Scene 5 is often called Ophelia's mad scene. As the scene opens, Ophelia is outside the royal chamber, wanting to speak with the Queen Gertrude, who is persuaded to allow Ophelia to enter. Ophelia communicates primarily in snatches of song that would have been familiar to Shakespeare's audience. And here is the title slide for today's show, Hamlet Act 4, Scene 5, with the line for today printed on it. When sorrows come, they come not single spies, but in battalions. So this is what Ophelia sings at the beginning of the scene after she enters and is talking or singing to the queen. She sings, "He is dead and gone, lady. He is dead and gone." I'll spare you my singing it, all right? He is dead and gone, lady. He is dead and gone. At his head, a grass green turf. At his heels, a stone, likely in reference to her father, who now is dead and buried. Now the king enters the scene and says to Ophelia, "How do you, pretty lady?" And Ophelia says, "Well, God yield you," which is an abbreviation for God yield you. In other words, God bless you for asking how I'm doing. Ophelia says, "Well, God yield you. They say the owl was a baker's daughter. Lord, we know what we are, but know not what we may be. God be at your table." She concludes it with a blessing as well. But what does Ophelia mean when she says, "They say the owl was a baker's daughter? Lord, we know what we are, but know not what we may be." This is an allusion to a folk tale in which a baker's daughter only gave Christ a small loaf of bread when he asked for food. Christ retaliated by turning her into an owl. Yeah, you don't read that in the New Testament. Here, Ophelia can be seen as the daughter of the baker, whose nature has been changed from person to owl, right? First, she was sane in her case. Now she is mad. So when we know that story that the original listeners to the play knew, we can understand better what it is that Ophelia is saying when she says, "They say the owl was a baker's daughter. Lord, we know what we are, but know not what we may be." The king then says, "Conceit upon her father," which means her imaginings are provoked by her father's death. Conceit doesn't mean you're stuck up or you're stuck on yourself back then. It means the imaginings of your brain. Conceit upon her father, he concludes about Ophelia's state. These are imaginings provoked by her father's death. Note, we have Hamlet pretending madness because of his father's death in order to seek revenge. And here we have Ophelia truly mad over her father's death, i.e., this is what true madness looks like, not what Hamlet has been playing at. Ophelia continues to sing snatches of song, but now the lyrics change and it sounds like she is talking less about her father and more about her relationship with Hamlet. She sings, "Tomorrow is St. Valentine's Day, all in the morning betime, and I, a maid at your window, to be your Valentine." Now, maid at the time was a word that we might say today as virgin. In other words, a young woman who has not had sexual relations with a man. That is a maid. And that will be important for you to know because she's going to play on that meaning. "And I, a maid at your window, to be your Valentine." Then up he rose and donned his clothes and dupped or unlatched the chamber door. "Let in the maid that out a maid never departed more." So this young woman who's a maid when she goes in to see her Valentine, this unnamed man or young man, she's a maid when she goes through the door to see him, but out of that door, a maid will never depart again because they had sexual relations, is what's being very strongly suggested by this somewhat ribald poem. This song suggests that her relationship with Hamlet may have included the sexual nature Ophelia's father sought to forestall by having her sever ties with him. Ophelia then says very sadly, "I hope all will be well. We must be patient, but I cannot choose but weep to think they would lay him in the cold ground." Now she's talking about her father again. "My brother shall know of it." Uh-oh. Remember Laertes, her brother, who went off to France in Act 1? Yeah, he's going to find out what happened to her dad, Polonius, because her dad is his dad too. Remember, they're brother and sister. This is the problem. Ophelia's brother, Laertes. What will Laertes do when he discovers his father has been murdered? Remember, this is a culture of revenge. Laertes will need to revenge the death of his father. Sort of like Hamlet has been supposed to be doing for almost an entire play now, and this play being the longest play of any play that Shakespeare ever wrote. It's a long play. Hamlet has been dillying and dallying for quite a period of time. But Laertes may be more direct in his approach than Hamlet. And whom will Laertes blame for his father's death? It appears the king and queen have kept the matter of Polonius's death somewhat secret from the outside world, so as not to let it out that Hamlet killed him in madness. Because whose fault was it that Hamlet was wandering around the castle mad and permitted to do such a foul thing, if not King Claudius? And Claudius permitted it, no doubt, out of love for his queen, Gertrude, Hamlet's mother. And as part of keeping the matter secret, they did not give Polonius a state funeral, or much of a funeral at all, but secretly buried him. Now, how will it look when Laertes finds out about it? It will look guilty as hell. That's how it's going to look. It will look like Claudius was the one behind the murder of Polonius, when the truth is he had nothing to do with it, at least not this murder, but should have kept Hamlet on a tighter leash. And now Laertes is already on his way back from France to seek revenge. Not only is he on his way, Laertes is now back in Denmark. And in a few moments, Laertes will be at the front door of the castle itself, together with a large crowd of Danish citizens supporting Laertes in his desire for revenge against Claudius, and likely to put Laertes on the throne in his stead. This is where the king Claudius says, "Oh, this is the poison of deep grief," talking about Ophelia. Laertes isn't there yet. He'll be there in a second. But now the king is feeling bad about the fact that Ophelia has gone mad. The king says, "Oh, this is the poison of deep grief. It springs all from her father's death. And now behold, Gertrude, Gertrude, when sorrows come, they come not single spies, but in battalions." There's our line for the day. Repeat it with me, please. When sorrows come, they come not single spies, but in battalions. And one more time, when sorrows come, they come not single spies, but in battalion. And Claudius continues, "First, her father slain. Next, your son gone." He's talking to Gertrude. He's talking about Hamlet. Notice that now it's your son. It's not our son. He's been talking about Hamlet as my son, our son before this. Now Hamlet is your son, Gertrude. Next, your son gone, and he, most violent author of his own just remove. The people muddied in their thinking, the people muddied, thick and unwholesome in their thoughts and whispers for good Polonius's death. And we have done but greenly in hugger mugger to inter him. In other words, we have done naively, that's the greenly part, in hugger mugger or secrecy to inter him, to bury him. That's the part that I was telling you about, that they didn't give him much of a funeral at all. It was not a state funeral. It was done in secret because they're trying to keep it a secret that Hamlet murdered Polonius. Claudius goes on, poor Ophelia, divided from herself and her fair judgment, without the which we are pictures or mere beasts. So we are merely paintings or animals if we don't have our sanity. And Ophelia has lost that, unfortunately. Last, and as much containing or as important as all these, her brother is in secret come from France. See, Claudius already knows. Feeds on his wonder, keeps himself in clouds, and wants not buzzers to infect his ear with pestilent speeches of his father's death, wherein necessity of matter beggared will nothing stick our person to arraign in ear and ear. And what this speech means is that Laertes feeds on his wonder as he's coming from France to Denmark, which means he takes advantage of this confusion of the people who are muddied in their thinking, remember, keeps himself in clouds, which means keeps his own intentions secret, and wants not buzzers. Buzzers are rumor mongers, and these rumor mongers will infect his ear. He doesn't want any. And want there doesn't mean he doesn't desire any. It means he doesn't lack any. There's plenty of buzzers or rumor mongers to infect his ear with pestilent speeches of his father's death. It has no matter in it. In other words, there's no substance to these rumors, but out of their need for gossip, which is deprived of true scandalous information, the scandal mongers will not hesitate to accuse me, Claudius, to all who will listen. Oh, my dear Gertrude, this, like to a murdering piece, and a murdering piece is a small cannon shooting shrapnel, a murdering piece, it's a piece of artillery. Oh, my dear Gertrude, this, like to a murdering piece, in many places gives me superfluous death. And the shrapnel that hits his body would have killed him even if there had been less of the shrapnel, right? It was more than enough to kill him. And therefore, he says, in many places gives me superfluous death. Now there is a loud noise off stage of a crowd of people, and the court messenger comes in with dire news for the king. The messenger says, save yourself, my lord. The ocean, overpeering of his list, eats not the flats with more impetuous haste than young Laertes in a riotous head, or bears your officers. So he's likening the approach of Laertes to the waves of the ocean on the flat beach. And in the same way that waves of the ocean rush onto the sand, taking everything before them, so is Laertes coming and taking with him the king's own officers. The messenger goes on. The rabble call him Lord. And as the world were now but to begin, antiquity forgot, everything in the past forgot, custom not known, the ratifiers and props of every word, they cry, choose we, Laertes shall be king. Caps, hands, and tongues applaud it to the clouds. Laertes shall be king. Laertes king. So Claudius has a big problem on his hands, as we can see. Now Laertes and his crowd of supporters are at the door, and Laertes comes into the court through the doors, but bids his riotous supporters wait outside so he can talk with the king for a moment in private. Laertes says, "O thou vile king, give me my father." The queen says calmly, "Good Laertes." Laertes says, "That drop of blood that's calm proclaims me bastard." See, if he is calm, even one drop of his blood, if it is calm about his need to revenge his father's death, then he is a bastard, and Polonius is not really his father at all. That drop of blood that's calm proclaims me bastard, cries cuckold to my father. In other words, once again, he's not really his father's son. He was begotten by some other man. That's what that means. Cries cuckold to my father, brands the harlot even here between the chaste, unsmirched brow of my true mother. Or, as I said, in other words, I would have to be a bastard and Polonius not my real father for me to be calm at a time like this. Claudius says, "What is the cause, Laertes, that thy rebellion looks so giant like?" And Laertes responds, "Where is my father?" The king says, "Dead." And the queen immediately says, "But not by him." The king, Claudius, says, "Let him demand his fill," talking to Gertrude, obviously. Laertes says, "How came he dead? I'll not be juggled with," that means deceived, "to hell allegiance," his allegiance to the king and the crown, "to hell allegiance, vows to the blackest devil, conscience and grace to the profoundest pit. I dare damnation. To this point I stand, that both the worlds, i.e., this world and the next world, I give to negligence or the recklessness of his own behavior. Let come what comes. Only I'll be revenged most throughly, which does mean thoroughly. Only I'll be revenged most throughly for my father. Laertes' epithets and outraged, blaspheming assertion, "I dare damnation," would have marked him to the audience as a conventional revenge hero, consumed by bloodlust and recklessness of the consequences, worldly or eternal. Indeed, this is exactly the way Hamlet started out this play when he learned from his father's ghost that he was murdered by Claudius. But as we have seen, Hamlet runs hot and cold in the revenge business. Laertes is presented as a foil to contrast Hamlet's thirst for revenge of his father's murder with that of Laertes. As we will see, Laertes does not run hot and cold, but only hot, and in this way represents the standard revenge hero of contemporary drama. So we can see through the comparison with Laertes how it is that Hamlet differs from the contemporary standard revenge hero, which Laertes represents. But Claudius has to redirect Laertes' anger from himself to somebody else. And if you guess that he's going to redirect it to Hamlet, you go to the head of the class. I mean, Hamlet really is the guy who killed Laertes' father after all. And Claudius, being a consummate politician and manipulator, is completely up to the task of redirecting Laertes' anger. This is what he says to Laertes. "Good Laertes, if you desire to know the certainty of your dear father, is it written in your revenge that swoopstake," which means that swoopstake, which we would say as sweepstakes or winner take all, "is it written in your revenge that swoopstake you will draw both friend and foe, winner and loser?" Laertes says, "None but his enemies." He's only going to have revenge on his father's enemies. Claudius says, "Will you know them then?" Laertes says, "To his good friends, thus wide I'll ope my arms, and like the kind, life-rendering pelican, repast them with my blood," which means feed them with my blood. What the heck does this mean? A life-rendering pelican feeding its young with its blood? Yes, in Shakespeare's time, the pelican was believed to feed her young with blood from her own breast, according to traditional folklore. Claudius says, "Why, now you speak like a good child and a true gentleman, that I am guiltless of your father's death, and am most sensibly in grief for it. It shall as level to your judgment appear, as day does to your eye." And now, just when Claudius is making headway with Laertes to turn his anger toward Hamlet, who should come back on stage but Ophelia, Laertes' sister, still mad as a March hare. You can almost hear Claudius thinking to himself that this is the worst timing in the history of bad timing. Laertes is already murderous over his father's death. What will he do when he finds out his sister has gone mad? Ophelia doesn't even have to say anything. The way she is behaving is more than enough for Laertes to know she is not in her right mind. Laertes says, "How now? What noise is that?" And now enters Ophelia. And you will notice that Ophelia doesn't say anything. She has no lines before Laertes realizes that she is mad. So she must be doing something. And this is up to the director to make it appear obvious to Laertes that his sister has gone mad, because Laertes then says, "O heat, dry up my brains. Tears, 7 times salt, burn out the sense and virtue of mine eye. Make it so I'm blind so I can't see this. Dry up my brain so I can't comprehend this. Oh heavens! Is it possible a young maid's wits should be as mortal as an old man's life? Now Ophelia is wandering about from person to person, handing them different kinds of flowers and listing off the properties for which those flowers were known. Ophelia says, "There's rosemary. That's for remembrance. Pray you, love, remember. And there is pansies. That's for thoughts." And it's up to the director as to which person on stage she will approach and give the flowers to and say these lines to, because that is not in the script. She goes on, "There's a daisy. I would give you some violets, but they withered all when my father died. They say he made a good end." A good end means died a good death, which he most obviously did not, being killed while spying from behind an heiress. But nevertheless, Ophelia says that they say he made a good end. Laertes is now beside himself with grief, and Claudius must be the sympathetic friend to take himself off the hot seat. Laertes says, "Do you see this, O God?" And the king, Claudius, says, "Laertes, I must commune with your grief, or you deny me right. Go but apart, make choice of whom your wisest friends you will, and they shall hear and judge betwixt you and me, if by direct or by collateral hand, directly or indirectly, they find us touched. That's the royal we. They find me touched, the king touched, the king involved in any way with Polonius's death. If they find us touched, we will our kingdom give, our crown, our life, and all that we call ours to you in satisfaction. But if not, be you content to lend your patience to us, and we shall jointly labor with your soul to give it due content. We, the royal we, the king of Denmark, will work with you to get you the revenge that you seek. And Laertes says, let this be so. His means of death, his obscure funeral, remember Polonius's funeral, nobody invited, no trophy, sword, nor hatchment. And a hatchment is a tablet placed over a tomb bearing the coat of arms of the deceased. Polonius was so quickly buried because they didn't want people to find out about it, that there was no state funeral. It did not have all of these normal things associated with the burial of a person of some rank in the government, as Polonius was. So Laertes is saying his means of death, his obscure funeral, no trophy, sword, nor hatchment, or his bones, no noble right, nor formal ostentation. Cry to be heard, as 'twere from heaven to earth, that I must call it in question. Of course you have to call it in question. Why is the king who's in charge of the funeral arrangements making it such a secret affair? It sounds suspicious as hell. The king says, so you shall. And where the offense is, let the great axe fall. I pray you, go with me. And they both exit together. Well, we know who actually killed Laertes' father, don't we? Hamlet. And Claudius is going to help Laertes understand that very same thing as well, and where the focus of his wrath should be, where the great axe should fall. But Hamlet has already been sent off to England by Claudius, from which trip Hamlet will never return. And Claudius may be giving us a hint as to the method of execution for Hamlet in England when he says, and where the offense is, let the great axe fall. This will be the axe of the executioner falling on the neck of Hamlet. Once Claudius convinces Laertes that Hamlet is to blame, which shouldn't be too hard because he actually is to blame, Hamlet's execution in England should take care of Laertes' thirst for revenge, though he will no doubt be upset he couldn't strike the fatal blow himself. Not only will Hamlet's execution take care of the problem of Laertes, it will also take care of the problem of Hamlet. He is too dangerous to have around, killing people as they hide behind curtains. And how was it Hamlet arranged the play performed by the traveling actors to portray so exactly how it was Claudius murdered his brother as he slept in the orchard by pouring poison in his ear? No, Hamlet is not only a danger to others, he is a direct danger to Claudius. And so he must be gotten out of the way by some method with which Claudius is not overtly linked. Claudius can't just run up to him and kill him or order someone else to kill him. Why? Because then Gertrude would know that Claudius was involved in killing her son. Gertrude can never know Claudius was in any way involved in the death of her son Hamlet. Sending him to England is the perfect plan. Nothing could go wrong. Or could it? We have seen Hamlet be quite resourceful in the past. Perhaps he will be resourceful again. Hamlet has upbraided himself several times for overthinking things and delaying his revenge. But Hamlet's penchant for thinking things through has a positive side to it. It allows him to see things coming that others might not, and stay one step ahead of everybody else who is coming after him. In the next scene, we will find out what becomes of Hamlet and whether this attempt by Claudius on Hamlet's life will succeed. Do you remember our line for today? When sorrows come, they come not single spies, but in battalions. Say it with me now. When sorrows come, they come not single spies, but in battalions. And third time pays for all. When sorrows come, they come not single spies, but in battalions. Well, that's about all for tonight. Remember, please hit the like button and please hit the subscribe button. Please leave a comment below as to your thoughts and ideas. I want to thank all of you for listening, and a special thanks to those of you who have gone the extra mile and gone to radiofreemormon.org and clicked the donate button and made a donation to the show. Your donations will keep Brush Up Your Shakespeare coming to you on a regular basis. As I say, that's about all for tonight. But please join me again next time for another episode of Brush Up Your Shakespeare. Thanks for watching. Good night, everybody.